So recently I took 3 level 10 PCs into the Gauntlet, a very difficult series of encounters intended to stress test builds, which is run by my friend CMCC Builds. I will include links to the battles below, but 2 of those builds were my creation, the Mercy Killer Monk and the Boltmaster Fighter, but the third, the Old Man of the Sea Druid, was the creation of Mandrax Corto, one of my friends in my Patreon, that he had been working on for some time before the Gauntlet and decided to polish it up and take it in, where it performed quite impressively, so I'm quite proud to present it to you today. Let's jump right in and take a look. So, the Old Man of the Sea is a tanky healer that produces a ton of emanation and AoE damage. It fights as a skirmisher who hangs around the front line and is comfortable on the front line. And as a role-playing thing, he specializes in wind, cold, thunder, and lightning elemental damage and effects. We'll be skinning a lot of our effects to that sort of appearance, and this restriction has been reflected in our spell selection. And again, this build has been playtested in the Gauntlet, and it kicked some major butt. So again, the relevant links will be in the description below. Check those out to see how well this build performs. And ultimately, this is a flexible build that has plenty of optionality to suit player preferences. If you don't like my spell choices or my feat choices, you can definitely, alter things to your liking, and it's not really going to change this build too much. Now, we are going to be starting with a somewhat unusual stat array. We'll be starting with a strength of 8, a dex of 14, a con of 15, an intelligence of 12, a wisdom of 17, and a charisma of 8. We are planning to take resilient constitution at some point, which is going to round out our constitution score, and we are going to start with a decent intelligence so that we're actually good at nature and religion. Plus, we're also going to have really good intelligence saves, since this build also gets intelligence save proficiency. So that is the stat array. We are starting with Perception, Arcana, Nature, Religion, and Stealth as our skills, but the skills are flexible. I think these are thematically appropriate, but if you like something else, feel free to take that. We do need Arcana for scroll creation, because we are going to be taking advantage of that. Low-level scrolls in particular are quite easy to make and cheap to make in the 2024 rule set, so we are definitely going to take advantage. We are taking Herbalism Kit as our tool so that we can crank out relatively cheap potions of healing. And we are going with the human species to get a heroic inspiration once a day, which is always awesome, an extra skill, and an extra origin feat, which is the main draw here, because we want to start with tough and magic initiate. Now, that said, if you don't want to do a human and want to take a different race or species, you are definitely more than welcome. Human is not critical to this build. You can drop tough and take in an Aasimar or a gnome or really any kind of race if you feel that that better fits your playstyle or your preferences. But Mando really liked human for this because it has a tanking role. And having extra hit points is always good if you're on the front line, especially since we don't yet have access to absorb elements, since it hasn't been published in the 2024 rule set. And without that, it's very helpful to have a big stack of hit points to deal with save or half effects. So again, our feats will be tough and magic initiate, tough to increase durability. The strong hit points is very good for this build. It is not a backliner. It operates on or near the front line. It does combo with its array of resistances. It gets 3 resistances throughout its career, and so that is going to combo with our additional hit points. And again, a feature of this build is it's quite difficult to kill. It is very tanky. It's going to have a high AC. It's going to have strong hit points. It's going to be very difficult to take down. Magic Initiate is critical to the build for the valuable offensive and defensive adds, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Moving into level 1, we are going to start as Druid, and we do not multi-class on this build. We go Druid all the way through level 20. We get spellcasting, and our type of spellcasting allows for the preps to be changed on a long rest, which is fantastic because we will be making a lot of scrolls, and this is going to allow us to scroll any first level spell, really any second level spell probably. Those levels 1 and 2 are the really affordable ones. And we are getting Druidic, which is just a ribbon. and we get a choice of Primal Order, Warden, or the other one. We went with Warden to get the medium armor and martial weapons proficiency, because that is critical to our build concept of tanky with a bite. We're definitely going to get use out of that armor and that weapon. For armor, we will be using Scale Mail plus Shield for a pretty solid 18. And then we will have Blade Ward and the Shield spell to back that up. So we're going to have a pretty strong AC and be very hard to hit. And again, this combos with our good hit points to make us very tanky. And do try to get the DM to allow you to cast Blade Ward when appropriate. Some DMs are cool with casting 1-minute spells, others are not prior to entering battle. Personally, I think if you know you're about to engage, there's no reason that you can't, but talk to your DM about that. And note that we will be reskinning our armor so that we are not actually wearing armor, but are more protected by the elements. So we're going to have like wind and ice and snow and such swirling around us, protecting us, a lot like Gaara's sand from Naruto, if you're familiar with Naruto. But yeah, we're going to be reskinning the armor to have that look that we want. We get a stack of spells from Magic Initiate, which are very strong for this build. We get Shield, which is going to increase our durability, right? It's one of the best defensive spells in the game, and it is a free cast once a day, so that's always nice. We are adding Blade Ward, which is a fantastic no-resource defensive spell. I really am a huge fan of Blade Ward in 2024. It's especially great in these low levels. We're going to be relying on it quite a bit because we have very few spell slots, and we're not going to have anything occupying our concentration, so Blade Ward is going to do a lot of work for us in Tier 1. It is also going to be a great backup concentration option throughout our entire career. I mean, man, for no resources, a cantrip, Blade Ward is really, really awesome. We are going to reskin this as a Storm Ward, so again, winds and snow and ice and such. And we are getting True Strike, which is going to allow us wisdom-based attacks and a damage bump at higher levels. And it's going to combo with other abilities that we get at later levels to grant us a really strong no-resource game. Our off spell slot turns are quite strong, as we will see. We are adding Guidance, for obvious reasons, one of the best cantrips in the game. We are adding Thorn Whip, or Water Whip, as we will reskin it, to give us another range cantrip with a forced move. The forced move rider is very important for us, and is going to combo with our Wrath of the Sea push and Spike Growth, both of which we are picking up at level 3. Obviously, we will talk more about those when the time comes. We are going to be adding Cure Wounds and Healing Word for a solid array of healing options. Remember, this is a full healer build, and we are going to feature all of the major healing options throughout our career, and it starts with Cure Wounds and Healing Word to give us something we can use at range, and something that's got a little more oomph if we are close enough to touch them. We are also going to be adding Thunder Wave, and this is a big spell for us. It really plays into our RP and our role as a blaster. So this is going to give us a strong AoE option that includes a push option. So pretty good damage for T1. It is part of our role-playing playstyle, and it doesn't have any range, but that's fine because we tend to play on or near the front line. So Thunderwave is going to be a good spell for us, and we're going to be using a lot, especially in like levels 1, 2, and 3. We are also adding Jump, which in 2024 is a fantastic maneuverability options. I mean, it really jumped up to be one of the best spells in the game. So this is going to stay relevant throughout our entire career, especially when our emanations come online, and additional movement is really helpful. And this is an elite option for scrolls, because first level scrolls are going to be really cheap, especially when we get really high in level. And this spell basically is always useful. You're always going to have a few dead BAs that you can get a jump out, and having that additional movement is really amazing. So at this level, we are basically a melee tank. You know, we're going to be on or near the front line and smacking things with the occasional Thunder Wave, but our limited spell slots, because we only have 2 at first level, probably going to be used for shields and healing. But you know, we can jump in an emergency. We have a really nice array of options to begin at level 1. Just not that many slots, but you know what level 1 character does. Moving into level 2, we are getting Wild Shape and Wild Companion, and this build does not wild shape as a role-playing thing, so it's never going to be taking any animal forms, but the temporary hit points part is nice, so I'm sure you can talk to your DM and not actually have to take an animal form. You can just use your wild shape to get those temp HP, and then adventure in your human form as this build's roleplay intends. And we are getting a wild companion, and that is actually a nice add for this build. It's going to be the primary use for our wild shapes at level 2, and it's going to be a reliable way of getting advantage on our melee attack. The familiar can do the help action. So there's lots of other things you can do with the familiar, tons of utility uses. See my deep dive on advanced familiar tactics for more info. And we will be able to get a free use of it every day with a lot of DMs, right? Like you wake up, you just summon your familiar, and then you take a short rest immediately. So as you're eating breakfast or taking a shower and such. So talk to your DM about that. A lot of DMs will be amenable to just having a familiar and not losing any wild shapes in practice. And then we are going to be adding Fairy Fire with our next spell prep. It's going to be a sometimes useful option against invisible enemies, and it can provide buffs to your allies if you got some strong marshals on the team, but we're only going to keep it for a couple levels and drop it at level 5. Moving into level 3, we get our subclass, and we get Wrath of the Sea and our subclass spells. So Wrath of the Sea is a fantastic ability that is a feature for us throughout our career. It weaponizes our bonus action, regardless of what our action is, and so we are going to be able to get damage and a 15-foot push out of this whenever we target an enemy that fails their con save. It's a really flexible BA that allows a lot of different tactical approaches and then tack on that BA as opposed to kind of locking you into one sort of attack style or attack sequence. It does attack the con save, but that's not as bad in 2024 as it was in 2014. Apparently the con saves for the monsters have normalized somewhat, and it's not quite so good for them. And so now, just by weaponizing our bonus action, we're going to have really great no resource turns, right? A cantrip plus a bonus action Wrath of the Sea. That is really sweet. And it does have a 10-minute duration, so you will be able to precast it sometimes and get multiple battles out of it on occasion. And it does clog a little bit with Shillelagh, which we are picking up at next level, but, you know, what can you do? Try hard to precast Shillelagh if your DM is amenable. Now, as far as the subclass spells, I think they're really nice. A solid mix of blast, control, and utility, and it's a flexible suite of spells that offers a lot of options in a variety of different situations, which I really appreciate. I like, you know, having a lot of tools in the bag for various scenarios. We are going to get a Ray of Frost cantrip, which is an interesting control option. It has better range than Thorn Whip, and we're typically not going to use it for damage because True Strike is stronger in that regard, but that 10-foot move debuff rider is fantastic. If you pair it with ally move debuffs, you can really stick someone with no move, and it can be very helpful when you are fighting creatures that are kiting or are burrowing, and it's a really, really nice rider to have. So we're very happy to add Ray of Frost. We will get Gust of Wind from our subclass spells, which is a solid situational defense versus smoke and fog and gas, for example, Cloud Kill or Fog Cloud. Then we are adding Fog Cloud, which is an excellent situational defense versus spellcasting, True Sight, Pack Tactics, lots of great scenarios for it. Check out my deep dive video on Heavy Obscurement for more info about how great Fog Cloud is. Then we are adding Shatter and Thunderwave as decent ranged AoE blasts. We've already had Thunderwave, but we now get it as a subclass spell, and so that frees up a prep which we will use to add Lesser Restoration to round out our healing options. Then we are adding Spike Growth as a huge add for this build. This is a very powerful option that is going to combo with other force move options like grapples and pushes, which we can do ourselves. We have the bonus action Wrath of the Sea, which can push a creature. We have Thorn Whip, which can drag a creature. And we've got Thunderwave, which can push creatures. In fact, Thunderwave can potentially push multiple creatures through Spike Growth. So this is a really great combo and spell for us. Allies will also be able to use the Spike Growth because they're certainly going to have force moved options. I mean, if you've got a monk with Grappler on the team, for example, Spike Growth is amazing. Again, see those Gauntlet videos. And the difficult terrain offered by Spike Growth can be excellent if properly deployed in the correct scenario. And again, we were very happy to add Spike Growth. It's a featured spell for us and is the highlight of our level 3 adds. And do note that we are going to reskin Spike Growth as Ice Spikes, just, you know, like icicles sticking out of the ground, razor sharp. So we are probably now going to lead with Spike Growth as long as we have the slots. Put that down in the most advantageous scenario, and then start comboing with it with our own abilities and our allies. Then our off turns are going to be Cantrip plus the bonus action Wrath of the Sea, and that's pretty solid output. Moving into level 4, we get our first feat, which will be Warcaster. That is going to bump our Wisdom to 18, and Warcaster is really fantastic for this build. I mean, first of all, it locks in concentration, which is fantastic for us since, again, we operate on or near the front line, so we do expect to be targeted and taking hits, so we're going to want to lock in that concentration. And it will allow us to avoid having to have a free hand to use somatic components, which is good for us because we have a shield in one hand and a weapon in the other hand. So that is really nice. We're going to be able to cast our shields and not have to worry about juggling. It gives us the option to cast a spell on an opportunity attack, so we can True Strike an enemy or some such, or we can also potentially use it on our allies if they incur opportunity attacks, because that is something that you might be able to do in 2024. Ask your DM. I personally currently don't think that you can, based on some of the flavor text surrounding opportunity attacks, but the actual rules part doesn't specify that it has to be an enemy, so you might be able to do friendly opportunity attacks and put like a buff on one of your allies if they rush past you. Talk to your DM about that, but it might be possible. And of course, it's always amazing to bump our casting stat and get increases to our damage and our attack rolls and our save DCs. And we are now sometimes going to end turns with a whip in our hand, because that is going to threaten OAs versus enemies that are 10 feet away, and then we can sub in a cantrip for the opportunity attack if they do trigger it. So kind of an advanced play there. You don't necessarily have to mix this in, but it can be advantageous for you to sometimes have that 10-foot reach and combo it with Warcaster. We get to add a cantrip, which is going to be Shillelagh, because that is going to bump our melee damage die starting at next level to a d10 and then higher as we progress throughout our career. And it will give us the option to do force damage, which is amazing because there are no creatures in the game so far that are resistant or immune to force damage, so it's the best damage type. And we are going to be casting Shillelagh on a quarterstaff that we are going to reskin as a boat hook. Finally, as our leveled spell prep, we are going to be adding Aid, because that is an excellent hit point buff that includes our allies, and it can be really good for party heal-ups in really tough battles where you have multiple allies down at 0 hit points. You can get up to 3 with Aid and bring them all back up. And at higher levels, when we have more slots, it is going to be a really nice option to just, buff our hit points as a defensive precast. Personally, in my experience, I have found that the 4th level slot is kind of the sweet spot in terms of where you want to cast an Aid, but it will be available, and sometimes, you might want to upcast it to 6th, 7th, or even higher levels. Aid is awesome and very happy to add it. Moving into level 5. We get Wild Resurgence and our proficiency bump, so that is always awesome. That is going to bump our Shillelagh base damage die to a d10, and our True Strike gets an additional d6 force damage, so that's really cool. I'm going to assume that we can now afford Half Plate at level 5, and that's going to bump our AC to 19. Again, we are going to skin it like Gara's Sand, but with snow and ice and wind. And Wild Resurgence is mildly helpful. I'm not super impressed by it, but it does help a bit. The best thing about it is that we're basically always going to have a Wrath of the Sea available, since we can now convert spell slots into wild shapes. And it will be especially important at level 14 when we have Oceanic Gift come online, because that calls for 2 wild shapes. And so being able to convert a spell slot into wild shape might be very helpful at that point. Otherwise, it's not super impressive, but it's a nice add. We're not going to say no. As far as spells, we are adding Lightning Bolt from our subclass spells for a thematic add that adds iconic AoE damage. Always happy to add Lightning Bolt. And we get Water Breathing, which is a great ritual for RP synergy and nice to have on your party members just in case. Sometimes water is involved, and to be able to breathe in it can be clutch at the right moment. For our chosen spells, we are going to be adding Aura of Vitality and Revivify to add some incredible healing options, right? I mean, these are staples in the full healer build kit, and we're really happy to add them because, boy, they are both really nice and increase the durability of your team. And then we are going to be adding Conjure Animals as our first powerful persistent AoE. And we're very happy to add this. Conjure Animals is very powerful, and we really can't wait to cast it for the first time. It is a save or suck, which is unfortunate, but you are going to be able to sweep it around and get all kinds of enemies. Once we cast it, it's going to be pumping out damage every turn, supplemented by our really strong no resource option, so we are going to be doing a lot of damage once we can put Conjure Animals on the field. Not only can you sweep it through enemies for damage, but it can act as a deterrent. If you place it in front of your party or in your choke point, it's going to incentivize enemies not to go in there. And because it works on movement, when you plan to drop it and use a different concentration spell, you can still do a sweep of the damage first and then drop your concentration. So just really an effective and efficient spell. Conjure Animals is amazing. Now, it is going to combo with your enemies. Once you have a Conjure Animals out there, your allies are going to be able to push it or force move enemies into it on their turns so that you can get some off-turn iterations of damage. And it's pretty easy to place because you're operating it from range, and it's not an emanation like Conjure Woodland Beings is, which we're going to be getting in a couple levels. And so it's got a lot of utility for being able to operate at a distance. And we are going to reskin this as Conjure Blizzard. So instead of like animal spirits, it's going to be a mobile blizzard that messes up our enemies. We're going to have to drop Fairy Fire because we need the spell slot, and we have many superior concentration options now, so no biggie. And do note that at this level we can upcast Continual Flame, and therefore you are going to want to prepare a couple of items with upcast Continual Flame, because Continual Flame that is upcast defeats darkness, and that makes it a no-brainer for any kind of dungeon excursion, and just always good to have in the back pocket in case you run into some drow or whoever else that might use darkness on you. Now that we have Conjure Animals, we are going to lead with that as long as we have the sufficient spell slots. Once we run out of thirds, we're going to fall back to Spike Growth and supplement it with our awesome no resource cantrips and Wrath of the Sea. Note that level 5 is about where I expect PCs to start picking up uncommon magic items. So a few items to target that I think have strong build synergy would be the Cloak of Protection, Enspelled Armor Staff Weapon with Shield, Jump, Cure Wounds, or Healing Word, Elemental Gems, Goggles of Night to get us Dark Vision, Pearl of Power, a Quarterstaff +1, a Shield +1, Winged Boots, and the Weapon of Warning. So a pretty big list there. You will hopefully be able to get to choose one or two off of that. Do note that the Moon Sickle +1, which is not yet published, but I presume that it will be, is not good for us because our hands are already occupied and we're not going to have a hand free to hold that sickle. So that sucks. It is our class buff item, but we're not going to be able to use it. Now, I don't know how much control you have over the items that you get. Maybe you don't have any. So this is a list of items to target, but don't turn down any good item that you get, like, you know, a Staff of the Python. Might not have great RP synergy, but you're not going to turn that down. See my deep dive video on the top 5 uncommons in the game for more information about my opinion about the items. Moving into level 6, we get Aquatic Affinity, and that is going to be a very nice add to increase our emanation size from 5 feet to 10 feet. And we get a swim speed, which can be situationally very useful. It's got a lot of RP synergy. It combos with water breathing, which is one of the subclass spells that we picked up. It's always on and not attached to the Wrath of the Sea aura, so I like Aquatic Affinity. For our new spell prep, we are going to be adding Call Lightning, which is a really awesome single target blast. Technically, it is AoE, but it's like a really small area, so in practice, really, it's just a single target blast. And it's really nice to be able to just keep banging the same target over and over with those lightning bolts. It upcasts really nicely with a D10 for each additional spell level, and it's really excellent to use when you are forced to use ready actions against an enemy that is kiting or taking advantage of cover or popping in and out of burrowing or some such. When you have to ready actions, it's going to be a nice one that doesn't force you to concentrate and then lose your spell at the end of the round if it doesn't work. So it's really nice in that scenario. It actually featured really strongly in one of our battles in the Gauntlet against a Deep Dragon, so definitely check out that battle to see how good Call Lightning can be. Moving into level 7, we get Elemental Fury, Primal Strike, which is a fantastic addition to our no resource damage turns, giving us really, really good damage, like significantly superior to most casters' cantrip game. We are getting really good damage out of our action, and we're adding on damage through our bonus action with Wrath of the Sea. So really good damage. I mean, at level 7, Shillelagh at advantage, plus True Strike, plus Primal Strike, plus your bonus action Wrath of the Sea can crank out 32.5 points of damage. That's pretty impressive for no resources, right? Now, we did have to choose between Primal Strike and Potent Spellcasting, and Mando went with Primal Strike for several reasons. One, the damage is straight up better. Shillelagh plus True Strike plus Primal Strike is superior to Cantrip plus Potent Spellcasting, plus it scales better. We get bumps to True Strike at levels 5, 11, and 17, and we get a bump to Primal Strike at level 15. So this really scales nicely and continues to increase our damage as we level. We also have to deal with bonus action Clog in theory, but in practice it is not as bad because you have both Shillelagh and Wrath of the Sea, but Wrath of the Sea is a 10-foot emanation. Most battles that you start in are not going to have enemies that close, so you'll be able to cast Shillelagh at the start and then Wrath of the Sea on round 2 when you have enemies within range. Or you could ask your DM to cast Shillelagh before you go into it, so it depends on how they feel about 1-minute spells. Going with Shillelagh and True Strike plus Primal Strike gives us significantly better damage type options with Force and Radiant available, whereas if we went with Potent Spellcasting, we would be limited to the elemental damage of our available cantrips, so definitely better in that respect. And Potent Spellcasting would not affect our Wizard cantrips, only our Druid cantrips, so it wouldn't affect True Strike. And our range cantrips don't really benefit from additional damage, because we only use Ray of Frost or Thorn Whip when we need those riders, right? It's the riders that we want, and so when we are doing damage, we're going to be using True Strike. So Potent Spellcasting didn't really make much sense for this build. Primal Strike was a way better choice. Then we are adding Control Water as one of our subclass spells, which is really nice in certain scenarios. Like when you're on a ship or basically fighting on shore or in the water, Control Water can be really, really strong. So that's a really nice one to add and have in our back pocket. It's thematic and can be really effective in the right scenario. And then we are adding Ice Storm, which is an inferior blast. We're probably never going to use this because it does less damage than Lightning Bolt, but it's thematic and you might need difficult terrain. It's not impossible that would have an effect. So Ice Storm is a nice add here. But more importantly, we are getting Conjure Woodland Beings, which is a huge add for us. We are going to be featuring this spell throughout the rest of our career. Very excited to add Conjure Woodland Beings here. It is an incredible emanation option. It's going to combo with Jump and Thorn Whip and our various types of Force Move. It's force damage, which is the best damage. There are no enemies that are resistant or immune to it as of yet in 2024. And it's going to combo with your allied force move options. I mean, if you've got a grappler or someone with the push mastery or someone who has maneuvering strike, I mean, there are just so many ways to get off-turn iterations of damage with Conjure Woodland Beings. It's a huge part of 2024 tactics, so being able to deploy it is really awesome. It has a 10-minute duration, so it allows for aggressive precasting and can potentially last for multiple battles. And it offers a bonus action disengage, which is pretty sneaky good. I mean, sometimes you have to disengage, and when you do, it's nice to not have to use your action and you can use your bonus action to disengage. So that can be pretty sweet. Conjure Woodland Beings is awesome. We are super happy to add it. We are going to be reskinning it as a Living Tornado, and again, this is our lead option now for the rest of our career. We are going to be upcasting this quite a bit, and everything else, Conjure Animals and Spike Growth, and even spells that we are going to be adding at later levels, are backups to Conjure Woodland Beings. That is our main thing. Moving into level 8, we are adding Resilient Constitution, which is going to buff our Constitution to 16, and really nice to add for us. We get more hit points, and that's going to help us in our whole tanking thing. It's going to improve our concentration, so we have both Resilient Con and Warcaster now, so concentration pretty locked in, which is very important because enemies are not going to like our Conjure Woodland Beings, and they're going to be trying real hard to disrupt our concentration. So really nice to lock those in, and it's just nice to have con saves in general, right? A lot of con saves in this game. It's one of the major saves, so it really increases our tankiness and our durability. For our spell prep, we're going to be adding Dispel Magic here, because I've been wanting to add it, but I just haven't had room. And now we do, because I'm not really all that enamored of the other level 4 options. And we've got Conjure Woodland Beings. That is going to be consuming like all of our 4th level slots and a lot of our 5th and 6th and higher level slots as well moving forward. So we don't really need Other Force. Good point to add Dispel Magic here. And the build is pretty much online now. Really tough, good hit points, difficult to break its concentration, pumping out tons of AoE damage, really tanky, and a full healer. So we're performing pretty well. This build does get better as we go along, but all of its core features are in place, so that's really awesome. Moving into level 9, we get our proficiency bump, which is always awesome. For our subclass, we are getting Conjure Elemental, which it's an interesting add for single target damage plus Restrained. It's difficult to deploy because you can't move it, so that is unfortunate. Probably best in like a choke point or like in a small room versus a single enemy. Probably not going to be casting this much over our other options, but we'll take it. Then we are getting Hold Monster as our other subclass option. We're never really going to use this. We're not controllers, so yeah, we'll take it, but it's not going to help us really much. We are going to be adding Greater Restoration as part of the standard full healer kit. And then we're going to be adding Sleet Storm, which it's late to add, but it's a thematic control option that is one of my favorite spells. Fits really nicely with this build, and do see my deep dive on Sleet Storm for more information about how great it is. Now remember that we change our spells out on a long rest, so we can add spells like Awaken, Commune with Nature, Planar Binding, Scrying, right? These are all available if we need them. They have utility uses, sometimes you might want them, and for us it just takes a long rest to get them, so that's pretty cool. And level 9 is where I expect PCs to start acquiring rare items, so some rare items to target that have build synergy: Armor +1, Boots of Speed, Cape of the Mountebank, Cube of Summoning, the various elemental summoning items, the Enspelled Armor, Staff, or Weapon with Aura Vitality, Conjure Animals, or Lightning Bolt, a Hook of Fisher's Delight, just for the roleplay stuff, Quarterstaff +2, Ring of Spell Storing, Rings of Resistance, Shield +2, and the Wand of Lightning Bolts. Again, the Moon Sickle is not available for us because our hands are full, which is unfortunate. And as always, it's a pretty long list of items to target. Hopefully you'll be able to get some, but don't turn down other items if you don't have much control over your items that don't have build synergy, but that are really good, right? I mean, if you get a vicious weapon, you're going to use it, right? Even though it's not like, perfect synergy for our build. Do see my deep dive video on the top 5 rares in the game for more information about my thoughts about items. Moving into level 10, we get Stormborn, and this is a huge add for us. Stormborn is awesome. Getting that fly speed is always amazing, especially since we also have a swim speed from Aquatic Affinity. So now we are fully operational in any environment. We are not going to have to compromise our tactics in any of these environments, unlike other druids, right? Other druids might have to wild shape into an environmentally appropriate form, and that's going to limit their options, but we have no limits. We can operate in any environment. And we get an array of 3 resistances, which is awesome. It's very hard to get resistance in this game, and to get 3 in one fat stack, we'll take that all day long. We get another cantrip. We're just adding Elementalism as a kind of flavor thing. Feel free to pick something else if you want. It's not that important. And we are going to be adding Cone of Cold for a strong thematic AoE option. It's a good combo with the Stormborn fly speed, because if you are shooting from above, a cone turns into a diameter. So a 60-foot cone turns into a 60-foot diameter, which is a 30-foot radius. So pretty good. Bigger than a fireball. Then at level 11, we don't get any more class abilities, but our Shillelagh does bump to a d12 damage die, and our True Strike bumps again for an additional d6, so now 2d6 force damage added on. And for our spell prep, we are going to add either Hero's Feast or Heal, depending on the circumstances. Because again, we can choose, our spells are chosen on a long rest. And Hero's Feast is fantastic in the correct scenario, but you don't always have to prep it, right? It has a 24-hour duration, so you can cast it just prior to a long rest, and then get the spell slot back and still have 16 hours of Hero's Feast available. And it has a very costly component, so you're not going to be casting Hero's Feast a lot. It is available, and you will want to cast it when you have the opportunity, but normally we are going to be taking Heal, because Heal is a fantastic option for a full healer, and so we are going to take that most days, but it's important to know that we have Hero's Feast available. We can also take Windwalk, which can be really, really good in the right scenario as well, but Hero's Feast, I think, deserve to call out. Moving into level 12, we get another feat, and we are adding Wisdom +2 to max out our Wisdom and casting stat for obvious reasons. Nothing else going on here. We don't even get another spell prep. Moving into level 13, we get our proficiency bump, which is always awesome. And then we are adding a couple of 7th level spells. Firstly, Regenerate, as an amazing full healer option. Regenerate is really impressive. You can cast it on your team's strongest marshal and heal that dude for 600 hit points over the course of an hour. And it's going to act as a pseudo death ward, where every time he goes to 0, the regeneration is going to bring him back up to 1. So see my deep dive video on Regenerate for more info about how awesome Regenerate can be. And then we are going to be adding Reverse Gravity, which can be a fun situational AoE blast. It's got a pretty big radius of 50 feet, so you're going to have a quite large area and be able to get a lot of enemies into it. And it can be really thematic and fun and effective. And we are going to reskin it as Gale Force. So all of these winds are just shooting upwards and forcing enemies to the ceiling or, into the air. And then you can drop them as you normally do with Reverse Gravity. And it's awesome. So we're going to be adding that, and it's going to be a lot of fun when we get to cast it. And do note that at this level, Plane Shift and Symbol are also available. Again, on a long rest, you can change your spells, so if you really need to go to another plane, you can, plane shift or whatever. We will be dropping Cure Wounds as a standard prep, as we have stronger healing options at this point and other various demands on our first, so we're probably not going to be casting it that much. I think it's safe to drop it, and we will just carry a few scrolls of it as a backup if we need to. And level 13 is where I expect PCs to start getting very rare items. So, items to target with strong build synergy, Armor +2, Candle of Invocation, Enspelled Armor Staff Weapon with Conjure Woodland Beings, Cone of Cold, or Summon Elemental, Quarterstaff +3, Shield +3, Staff of Frost, the Staff of Thunder and Lightning, and of course the Wisdom Tome. You definitely want to get a Wisdom Tome if at all possible, because bumping our Wisdom is the only way to increase our Wrath of the Sea. Among other things, of course. Increasing your casting stat is always awesome. Again, we're not going to be able to use a Moonsickle +3, and again, don't turn down strong items that don't necessarily have build synergy, like a Spellguard Shield, for example. Not going to say no to that. Moving into level 14, we get Oceanic Gift, and that is pretty nice, actually. It allows us to straight up double our Wrath of the Sea, and so that is pretty amazing scaling in this game. It's pretty rare that things just straight up double, and being able to grant a fly speed to an ally through Oceanic Gift is really nice. Sometimes you need to help your allies fly, and to do it with a non-concentration option is really sweet. So we're happy to add Oceanic Gift here, and as a reminder, now Wild Resurgence becomes more appealing, because with Oceanic Gift it's going to take 2 wild shapes to enact it on 2 different people, so being able to get extra wild shapes through spell slots is really cool. And then at this point we were going to add Summon Elemental, just in case our allies are a little awkward with taking our Wrath of the Sea, because maybe they have really good bonus action options already. And so being able to add a persistent summon to carry our second Wrath of the Sea is just nice to self-contain the build. And the summon is already a good spell. Adding Wrath of the Sea really buffs it up quite nicely, right? Adding all of these resistances and a fly speed and a bonus action damage option with a push, that is really good. Like a 6th level slot for 3 attacks plus like Wrath of the Sea is really good damage output to add to your main PCs, because he's going to be pumping out his no resource damage, which is also superior. So the 2 of you acting in combination, man, that can be really good. You can put those guys on the front line, and between you and your summon, that's pretty tanky and will meet shield for a lot of your allies. And note, because of the fly speed conferred by Oceanic Gift, you don't have to choose Air Elemental when you need flight. You can still choose one of the chunky options like Earth or Water. And of course, we're going to be reskinning Earth Elementals as Ice and Fire Elementals as Lightning, to fit our theme. But yeah, man, really nice to add Summon Elemental. 1 hour duration, so you can be really aggressive with your precasting. Definitely going to get multiple battles out of it. And while this can also be accomplished with items, which I would hope that you're getting items to do this function earlier than level 14, if you don't have access to those items, it's really nice to have Summon Elemental here. We are now actually going to lead with Summon Elemental when it's just like 1 or 2 big enemies, and lead with Conjure Woodland Beings only if there's like 3 or more enemies, because that's the one downside of Conjure Woodland Beings, is that against single targets, it's not hugely optimal, right? We do have to drop Lesser Restoration here as a standard prep, but we will carry a few iterations of it on scrolls just in case, because it doesn't actually overlap with Greater Restoration or any of our other healing options, so we are going to want to have it available, but we will put it on scrolls and not memorize it as a standard prep. Moving into level 15, we get Improved Elemental Fury, which is going to bump our Primal Strike damage to 2d8, so that's really nice. Our no resource damage continues to scale. And then for our spell, we are adding Befuddlement, which we will be reskinning as Brain Freeze, as a strong single target blast that debilitates casters. I mean, they really pumped the damage up in 2024 to a quite respectable 10d12 or 65. And if you're smacking a caster, now they can't cast or use magic actions, so Befuddlement can be a nice one to add. But that said, the 8th level slot could also be good for Summon Elemental, because that's where it's going to get 4 attacks, and it will have Wrath of the Sea, so that will be really good. And we can use the slot because, again, we can switch spells on a long rest, so we can swap in Antipathy Sympathy, Control Weather, or Tsunami if it's necessary, right? In the appropriate scenario, you might want to take one of these. Moving into level 16, we are taking Skulker to get us Blind Sight. The rest of it doesn't really matter, which kind of feels bad, but it's definitely nice to add Blind Sight because Conjure Woodland Beings require sight. We're going to be able to see our enemies and land those Conjure Woodland Beings. It will also combo with Fog Cloud and Ever Smoking Bottle, as well as be a strong defense or counter to enemies who are deploying, darkness or heavy obscurement. And so, very nice to get this without a fighter dip. Dipping is going to put off our spell progression and our ability progression, and I think that being able to get it without dipping is really cool for us. We are also going to boost our dex, as we don't really have much choice, but if you wanted to, you could consider a con half feat here, and that way at level 19 with our epic boon, you could bump con to 18. So something like Speedy might make sense, but Mando decided to go with Skulker here because having Blind Sight is so important. Moving into level 17, we get our final proficiency bump. Our Shillelagh damage is going to bump to 2d6 damage dice, and our True Strike will bump to a total of plus 3d6 force damage, so that is really cool. And then with our spell, we are adding Foresight, which is a crazy strong combat boost, right? Being able to roll all of your d20 tests at advantage is always sweet, but it's especially nice for this build that we are attacked at disadvantage. So we are really, really tanky now with Foresight active. Foresight is also 8 hours duration, so it's going to last all day long. Multiple battles, really, really nice to add Foresight. Now we could prep Storm of Vengeance or True Resurrection instead. Those might be useful in the right scenario, but I don't see us too often choosing not to cast Foresight. And level 17 is where I expect PCs to start acquiring legendary items. So a couple of items that have strong build synergy, an Enspelled Armor Staff Weapon with Chain Lightning, Maze, Mind Blank, Power Word Fortify, Simulacrum, right? A lot of really awesome options in an Enspelled Armor Staff or Weapon, Armor +3, or a Scarab of Protection. I didn't really see, honestly, too many that had great build synergy, but don't turn down a Cloak of Invisibility if you get a chance to take it. I mean, any legendary is good, right? At level 18, we get Beast Spells, which does nothing for us because we don't use our wild shapes to shape change. So that kind of feels bad a little bit, but keep in mind, it just means that for levels 1 through 17, we basically already had this because our operating procedures didn't call for us to wild shape, so we've been able to pump out spells all the time, levels 1 through 17. And we get another spell prep. We're just going to add Plane Shift for convenience here. That way we don't need to wait after a long rest to prep it, and I always have it available, which makes it a viable defensive option. If we get plane shifted for whatever reason, we can always plane shift back. But this is basically a wildcard slot for us because there are a lot of potentially useful utility preps that we have available, and I'm just not a fan of the other Druid Knights. None of them are going to supplant Foresight. It's the one we're going to be casting all the time. Shape Change is very strong, but it doesn't fit into the roleplay of this build, so we're not taking that. And man, I wish Storm of Vengeance was better. Like, that has such perfect RP synergy, but it's just not a very good spell. We wouldn't cast it very much. At level 19, we get our Epic Boon, and we are going to take the Boon of Speed to combo with our Stormborn Fly Speed and Conjure Woodland Beings. It also has strong RP synergy because it's skinned as winds that are propelling the druids, so those become more powerful as we achieve 19th level. And we're going to take a bump to our dex, which will give us a slight boost to our initiative and our dex save. But talk to the DM. If you are going to continue to play at this high level, you might get more than one epic boon, and if more boons are on the table, you're probably going to want to bump your wisdom here instead, and that way you can get it to 22 on your next epic boon. Again, we add a spell prep. It doesn't matter, I just put down situational, so we can, prep Windwalk, or Scrying, or Anti-Life Shell, or Symbol, or Control Weather, or one of those other utility spells that fits with our roleplay. And then finally, at level 20, we get Archdruid, which is not the most impressive capstone, to be honest, but it's not horrible. I mean, the nice thing is that you can turn 4 wild shapes into a level 8 slot, and an extra 8th level slot can be really, really good for any build, so we'll take that for sure. And it is going to be nice to have at least one wild shape available per battle to get your Wrath of the Sea off. So not horrible, just not as impressive as other capstones, I think. And once again, our spell prep addition is going to be one of our situational options, like Windwalk, etc. So that's it. That is the Old Man of the Sea. Largely created by Mando. I contributed a little bit, but it is a really strong build that I'm very proud of. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below, how it can be improved, or what you liked or didn't like about it. And regardless, thank you so much for watching. This has been Bill Bronze and Dragons. I'm your host, Bill Brown Bafflestone. See you next time.